good morning, everybody. I am your substitute teacher for today. Greg and Rachel, thank you. Greg and Rachel are having a baby. They called me up about an hour and a half ago, and they said, we're on our way to the hospital. And I said, wonderful. Then I thought to myself, I was like, I don't have anything prepared. So this is going to be a very interesting class. However, what I did have prepared was a series that I was getting ready to put on the website for Pride. And it is regarding the symbolism of the original 8 colors of the Pride flag and how they correlate with the 12 powers and the 12 powers of unity. It was a teaching from Charles Fillmore, and there is actually some overlap and some parallels between those colors, and so I was like, this is actually a good opportunity. I also want to take time to mention that we are going to be at Ozarks Pride Fest, and we still need volunteers. And so I talked to Bobby this morning and said, hey, I'm going to be talking about Pride. This is a good opportunity. We're still looking for 3 to 4 greeters. We need 3 to 5 greeters, 3 to 4 rock painters. We need people, 1 to 2 people for raffle volunteers to do raffle tickets, because we're raffling off a cornhole bowl or board. They're out there. They're Pride colors. And so if you can talk to Bobby after this, if you're willing to volunteer, the more people that we have here, I think have at Pride, the better. And so I just wanted to put that plug in before we get started. And I wanted to talk about, so this is oh, that's a terrible picture, but it's very blurry. But this is the Pride flag that a lot of people see now. And recently, this portion was just included, which includes intersex people. This is like the inclusive Pride flag. It includes Black, Indigenous people of color. It includes trans people, and then the initial rainbow. However, the initial rainbow was actually meant to be an inclusive flag as well. It was developed, actually I want to go to a different slide that probably has a better image. Okay, so it was developed in the late 1970s. Does anybody know who Harvey Milk is? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So enough people.
A city politician.
Yes, he was a city. He was a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and he was openly gay. And there was a lot of controversy surrounding that, and he was eventually assassinated. But while he was alive, he commissioned Gilbert Baker to create a symbol for the gay community within San Francisco, and that symbol ended up being the rainbow. And Gilbert Baker collaborated with Lynn Segerblom. I don't really know a lot about Lynn Segerblom. I just read this morning that they collaborated together to create the rainbow flag. And each one of the colors has a symbolic meaning, which is why it's meant to be inclusive. And the very first color, the pink, we're going to talk about something we don't normally talk about in church, but that's fine. And I do want to get through all of the colors, and this is sort of a promo to what's going to be on the website. On the website, it will be, I have full articles available for each color, so.
I just say that there's a movie, Milk. There's a movie, Milk. We have that movie.
Yes, it's a great film. There's a film. There's also a documentary that's really good as well about his life. Sex is definitely a subject we don't talk about in church very often. And so the first color, pink, in traditional Pride symbolism. Just a second, I want to mute my computer so it's not coming through the television. Is sex, and so. In the articles that I'm doing, I correlated each symbol with an affirmation. But in terms of sex, so Unity has a really interesting relationship with this topic. So Unity is not like other Gnostic or other New Thought traditions in that, I mean, there are New Thought traditions that believe this physical reality is actually real. Like Unity. However, there's a lot, like Christian Science comes to mind, Course in Miracles, that believe that this reality, this physical reality, is an illusion. It's not actually real. It's just a product of the mind. And so when we talk about sex, that particular subject is about this physical reality. It's about the hormonal urge to merge. And in terms of my opinion and position on sex and sexuality, it is a natural part of human existence. And it should be blessed and honored rather than trying to escape from it, which is sort of the opinion of many of the Gnostic teachers. You know, we need to escape from this physical reality. And, you know, in terms of what Charles Fillmore believed, he believed that sex and sexuality was predominantly for the purpose of procreation. However, Susan, give me just 1 second. However, if you really consider our biology, that's, you know, saying that we're meant to escape our sex or sexuality. It's kind of like saying that demonizing our need for food as nourishment. You know, it's just a natural part of our physical experience. Go ahead. Can you get the microphone? And John, would you mind kind of...
Abraham Hicks would say, basically, if it feels good, do it.
Yeah. And the correlation for the 12 powers for pink, the symbolism is love. Go ahead, John.
It says purple on your slide.
It says, oh. So I made this slide an hour and a half ago. So if the colors don't all match, that's why. But no, this is supposed to be pink. It actually even looks a little purple on here, but yeah, this is supposed to be pink. In fact, I want you to... No, the word purple is... Anyway, so this is supposed to be pink, not purple. Purple is going to be the last color that we talk about. So I did create an affirmation, and I was wondering if we could just say the affirmation together. It's here at the bottom. So, I am perfect, whole, and complete. I am at peace with my sexuality. So, does anybody have any more comments? There's 8 colors to go through, so, but does anybody have any comments about this particular slide? Sure.
We have a lot of people who are of diverse gender.
Mm-hmm.
And in our family and friends and everything. And the more that I know people, I think that one of the things is when you talk about diverse gender, and everybody's head goes to sex,
Mm-hmm.
it's what gets us all messed up and everything. This is about loving.
Oh, for sure.
This is about loving, and there's never too much loving.
Mm-hmm.
And when when we begin to look at someone, and the first thing we think about is, well, how are they doing sex?
Right.
We miss the point.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that there's a balance there. I mean, I think that, you know, sexuality and sex can be something that's very positive and very good, and even very healing in a lot of cases. Anybody else?
No, I just made a smart ass comment.
I'm sure you did.
I know Louise Hay says for migraines, she suggests masturbation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's also good for incontinence.
My therapist said it's also good for incontinence.
There we go. So yeah. All right, we'll move on to the next color, red. And so in the 12 powers and in the pride symbolism, red symbolizes life. And within some New Thought traditions, I personally believe that life, the activity of life, is God. Is, you know, the activity, you know, life is is divinity moving through us. It's how we engage with the world around us. Actually, let me just pull up my notes about life. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a lot to say about sex, and I don't have much to say about this one. But let me but I do have articles tied to each one. So
I have a question.
Sure.
So red is life in the unity principles. Was that what the meaning was originally when Harvey Milton?
Yep, that was the original meaning as well in pride symbolism. And I did want to mention at the very beginning, although this wasn't really a prepared talk, but I did want to mention in the beginning of the talk about what pride is, because I think that sometimes, I think it's an ever-evolving and changing thing, right? But when we think about pride, some people think that it's just the celebration of sexuality, or it's a celebration of diverse genders. It's more than that. Pride, the word pride means the experience that you have when you transcend something or overcome something. Pride, the experience of pride, is actually directly correlated with the adversity that LGBTQI people have experienced in the world. And even if you just think, we kind of think, oh, this is a more accepting world and everything, which is, it is true. It's better than it was in the 1970s or even in the 1980s when I was born, or, but we also have to consider, if you think about just Springfield, Missouri, only 2% of churches treat LGBTQI people like humans. 2%. There's 8 churches in all of Springfield. There's 400 churches. Oh, there's over 400 churches. So if you think about the pride that I experience by not listening to those voices and yet still have a spiritual path, that's what pride's really all about. And I did want to mention that at the very beginning, that pride is not just we're going to celebrate sexuality and we're going to celebrate gender expression. We're going to celebrate the fact that we're alive.
That you're human beings.
That we're human beings, that we deserve to be treated like human beings. And so I think that maybe thinking about that part too, because that is life. And, there's a lot of being a part of the LGBTQI community for a while. When I got kicked out of seminary because I was in conversion therapy, and I thought, this is not working for me. Obviously, this is not something people can change. And I ended up losing my job because I was working for a ministry. I got kicked out of school, didn't have a relationship with my family anymore, lost the only community I ever knew. And in Kansas City, it was the gay community that came around me and pretty much just said, live. Survive this, live. And they made sure that I had a place to live. They made sure I had food. They made sure I had adequate transportation, because it was very strange. My car broke down like 2 days after I got kicked out of seminary. It was just like this whole series of events. I got very sick, which is actually fairly common for people experiencing trauma. In fact, a lot of the people that I know that went through conversion therapy with me, several of them have either committed suicide or just died of illness. Some people, bodies full of cancer, and just died. And so when we talk about pride, that's what I mean when I say pride. That's why it is important that we engage with pride, because we are one of the 2% of churches that treat LGBTQI people like humans. That's why showing up at pride and saying, listen, we see you, that's why that's so important. So.
And when you said the live, that's the red.
That's the red. I finally had something to talk about related to that, so.
Still in pink.
Oh, I'm still in pink.
Yeah, you went back to sex.
It happens more than I'd like to talk about.
Too much information.
Does anybody else have a comment on life? I'll tell you too, one of the things in my healing journey, the people that came around me, I was about as cuddly as a porcupine at that point in my life. And they still made sure that I survived it. And I was cruel to a lot of people, simply because I had lost everything that I knew, and so I didn't want to do that again. I mean, just the very fact that I'm sitting in a church is even 4 years ago, if you would have told me, oh, you're going to be sitting in a church and you're going to be teaching classes, I would have said, oh, that's bullshit. That's never going to happen, So that's really what pride's all about. But anyway, all right. Go ahead.
again, I don't know if this even would apply to the topic, but for me, the best way for me to embrace people and see people is not to see this as the only life. This is just, this time here is just part of that big L, beautiful, wonderful, eternal life. And there's so much to experience and so much to do and so much to create that when you begin to see from that perspective, you are appreciative of those who are creating something new or creating something different. You're adding to all that is. You're giving us all new ideas and opportunities because you're being authentically yourself.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And Louise Hay talks about how the soul does not have gender or sexuality. The soul itself, and that as we move, the reason why we bless our gender expression and our sexuality is because as we move through life experiences, we all have varying sexualities and genders. It's a natural part of the soul's experience. All right, so let's do the affirmation for this one. Life supports me. I am open and receptive to all the good that life has to offer. Life loves me.
That can be a hard one for a lot of people. Life loves me.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
On a bad day, it's hard now.
Yeah. We're going back to Louise Hay, but she was one of my substantial teachers when it comes to my spiritual development, and she used to sign all of her books "Life Loves You" when she would do book signings. Okay, so let's move to the color orange. Healing. So in the traditional pride flag, the color orange symbolized healing. For Charles Fillmore, the color orange symbolized zeal. So, and I kind of talked about, pride itself is evidence of healing. Some people say that pride is like the safe space for LGBTQI people. The reality is it's not for me because I just live my life the way I live my life everywhere. I had somebody even say about this church that, we want to create a safe space for the church, or for LGBTQI people. I said, I'm really not that interested in creating safe spaces. I want to create a safe world. That's why, to me, activism, be it, speaking up, whether, I think everybody here is straight, so this is perfect. Being a good ally is making sure that we speak up, making sure that, you educate yourself, you learn about these topics. I mean, who was surprised today when I said 2% of the churches treat LGBTQI people like humans? Was anybody surprised about that?
Not 2%. That's
2%, yeah, 2%. Right.
that's 1 in 100. No, it's half in 100.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty significant.
But that's also Missouri, It seems like
It's also Missouri because all the evolution and consciousness on this in this country seems to happen on the coastlines and move into the middle.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the gay thing as everything else.
It's 8 churches out of 400.
It is 8 churches out of 400, yeah. I think that doesn't have to be true.
that's what has.
The Unity movement took place in Kansas City. I mean, that was pretty significant.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, we're in the buckle of the Bible Belt, but we make change. First of all, we make change when we do something about it. The reality is that an ally, people will listen to an ally before they listen to someone like me or a trans person. An ally could go into most churches and people would be mad at them, but they might actually hear them. Whereas if I went into those spaces, I would just be immediately immediately shut down, possibly even dragged out.
You're trying to jump too big of a. That's because you're trying to leap too big of a gap. And even with Abraham teachings, they say, you can't go from super negative to super positive. You have to do it in gradual stages. And so to go into a church, you have to do it in gradual stages. And that's kind of the process that happens. And I've even experienced this in churches when I stood up and talked about things that had happened to me, and they didn't know how to respond. I had an abortion, and they were showing movies about abortion, and I was like, "Whoa, guys! These are real people." And they didn't know how to respond. And this was, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And they didn't know how to respond. So sometimes that shock factor, they can't absorb it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Well, and within those spaces, LGBTQI people have been demonized to the point that they don't have to listen. They don't. If they listen, they'll go to hell. Right.
One of the best places that we saw this kind of interaction, we went to a more like Presbyterian church in Las Vegas, New Mexico, when we lived there. And there were people in the congregation that were very fundamental, it's a sin. And there were people that were like a lot of us here in this room, the opposite. But they got together and openly dialogued, and if there was things that, it's in the Bible, well, let's look and see what it says. Let's look it together. Let's see what it says. Let's learn the history. And the best one I ever saw was there was this engineer, a good friend, and he said, and we had another engineer who was a lesbian that was on the board there. And he said to her one time, he said, you're never going to convince me that homosexuality is not a sin. But he said, it is a greater sin. The greatest sin that I can commit as a Christian is to not love. And it is a greater sin for me to judge and love you than this topic is.
Yeah, who's gonna throw the first stone?
Yeah. Anybody else on that? So when it comes to healing, there are different levels of healing. We heal as individuals. And by the way, healing, the word heal, it can be related to physicality, it can be related to a physical condition. But the word healing means to be whole. It comes from the same root word as to be whole. Healing is the process of becoming whole in our consciousness and in our physical bodies. But to me, community healing is just as important. And I kind of wanted to discuss a little bit of allyship as well. That the way that we heal is, we can heal communities through allyship. Like I said, there are certain people that just wouldn't hear my voice, but they might hear the voice of an ally. Another thing too that I think does a lot of damage, I think recognizing whether or not you're an ally is important as well. I have a lot of friends who I love very dearly, and they think that they're allies. I actually have one friend in particular who believes very strongly that they're an ally, but they have two different Facebook pages. One of the Facebook pages is for their family and their church, and that page is very, it's very sanitized. Then they have another Facebook page, and they're part of all these LGBTQI groups, and they're part of, giving their the mom huggers. They're part of all of that, right? And they show up at all of our events, and I think, and this is somebody from Michigan when I was doing Pride, and I think it's fine that they do that, but the reality is that's not what an ally does. I love hugs. If you want to give me a hug, that's great, but just recognize that's not you're not being an ally there. An ally recognizes and puts themselves in uncomfortable situations because they recognize that LGBTQI people live in those uncomfortable spaces all the time. All the time. So.
I'd say a similar thing with race. As well.
Oh, there's
It's
totally
just-
parallel.
it's
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I understand the fear that people don't want to lose their family. I get that. I lost my family. I mean, I reconciled with my family, around 10 years after that. But I get that. However, if you want to be a strong ally, it means that you stand with people who are oppressed, whether it's Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQI people. That's what an ally would do. And I wouldn't say that means putting yourself in harm's way. I would say that you have some level of integrity when it comes to how you engage with the world. So, and I do believe that healing will take place on a community level when our allies start. Not that I believe that our allies have to do it, but I do believe that this performative allyship sometimes does more damage than it does good. So, all right. So, and then zeal. Yeah, that's what it represents in the 12 powers. I want to get through all the colors. So, but let's go ahead and read the affirmation. Healing energy flows through my mind, circumstances, and community. Wholeness flows through my consciousness, expanding my capacity to experience love, joy, and peace. This is so incorrect. I'm not sure what happened here in this slideshow, but I'm going to take it down for just a moment because the next slide is also incorrect.
That's cool right there, yeah.
See what happens when you put slides together in 15 minutes. They're incorrect.
Oh, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Nope, I don't pick that up at all. Nope. Careful, I'm really good at just reflecting that stuff back. So.
I just have one question.
Sure.
No, you can't, he's on his phone.
I was looking at trippy illusions.
Oh, man.
Okay, so having come from a early role of victimhood in my life, from abuse and a lot of that, and going into a lot of therapy and going to a lot of groups and victim groups, and so when I came into that background, and then I came into metaphysics, and metaphysics is teaching me to not choose the victim role anymore in my thoughts and in my heart and in my mind. And when I stopped doing that, then my world around me began to change. And so the challenge for me as a person who really believes and practices metaphysics, is how I support those who seem to be oppressed. Again, I'm talking about from a metaphysical point of view, in that I see my role is to not see someone who is a diverse gender as a victim in any way.
Right.
They're powerful and they are whole, and they are my brothers and my sisters in this power, and how to support. It's like I went to things, but most of them are about the victimhood of, rather than the strength and the power and the sameness as all of us. And that's the challenge I have, and that I have been, I have asked at times, help me, how do I apply this and be there and be part of this? And it didn't seem like it seems like I haven't had a place to do that, except in my own heart and mind, and going, this is not the truth of you. This is not the truth of life. The truth is, I know you. I know who you
Right.
are.
So my question would then be, what spaces were you inhabiting when you experienced those things? Was it like PFLAG, or was it like a pride organization? Like what?
I was going to PFLAG, and
Okay.
that was one of them, and I just trying in my own heart to not see you all as victims. You're not.
Right.
You're powerful. You're amazing children of God with the power of creation and life.
Mhm.
I don't want to see you as less.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I wouldn't recommend anybody seeing us as less. I mean, that isn't very helpful. Just like, the Black, Indigenous people of color, I wouldn't recommend seeing them as less than either. I talking about allyship, one of the things with performative allyship that can sometimes come up is, the white savior complex, which happens a lot.
You don't know what that is? He doesn't know what that
Okay,
is.
so it's when somebody recognizes their privilege, but then they take on the responsibility of fixing everything. Because cis straight white people have a lot of privilege, right? But I don't necessarily see cis straight white people as my savior, and I wouldn't recommend you seeing yourself as a savior. That's not what an ally is. An ally stands shoulder to shoulder.
You want to look at codependency is another way of looking too at an error way of trying to help.
Mm-hmm. A codependency. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. Does that answer your question? I would still inhabit those spaces. Another thing to recognize that within the healing process, Louise, talking about Louise Hay. Louise said that life is like a school, and some people they just flow through life. Everything is very easy and simple, and that's because they are in kindergarten. And some people have very difficult experiences. They may be LGBTQI, or they may be a person of color, and they may have. And it's not because they're less than. It's because their curriculum is much higher. I kind of like to see it that way. And so so it's not as though we focus on being a victim, but there is a part of the process where we have to heal that portion of ourselves. There's a part of the process when you're healing from cancer. You don't pretend the cancer isn't there. And the same is true with any other form of healing. You can't pretend away an experience. You heal the experience. So we cannot pretend away the conditions of our communities today, where there's only 2% of spiritual institutions that treat LGBTQ people like humans. We can't pretend that away. That doesn't fix anything. When we ignore something, one of the metaphysical laws is that whatever we're putting out comes back to us. And so if we are ignoring something, what are we putting out? Ignorance, and that just keeps coming back, and it just keeps coming back, and it just keeps coming back. So I think that there is a balance, and really the question is not, I don't want to focus on being a victim or the vulnerability. It's not that, it's how do I show up and elevate that into spirit, into life, into wholeness, into healing. John? He's no. Chanel, do you mind using the mic? Thanks.
In regards to the victimhood, I'm wondering if you can treat it differently from seeing someone as a victim versus acknowledging hurt. And I think sometimes staying in victimhood is not moving on from that stage. Yeah. And to me, that's a different process from a step in the process where you're acknowledging, these things were very hurtful, and trying to heal from that, and then moving on to better emotional health.
Yeah.
And so to not, I guess, not seeing somebody as a victim, but more so just acknowledging that hurt is there, and then but being aware that that's a stage and something else to move on to.
Yeah. No, I agree too, and that's really, it is a stage. And we have to recognize the experience. We have to recognize that lived reality. So, John?
Yeah, now, what I wanted to say finally
Okay, good.
formulated, that say the 400 churches that don't accept LGBTQA, the judgmentalness that's involved in their practice, their spiritual practice, comes right back at them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I feel compassion for them.
Yeah, we need to be praying for them.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I actively send love to all of those spaces.
Yeah.
Jesus said, love your enemies, bless those who want to do you harm.
And bottom line, find me someone who's not experienced excruciating pain in their life.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's just being human. That's how we evolve. That's how we grow. So anyway, okay, yellow. Sunlight and wisdom. I kind of liked the parallel. So sunlight is what it represents in the traditional pride flag. Wisdom is what it represents in the 12 power. And I sort of liked the correlation between the two because wisdom illuminates our path. And obviously sunlight illuminates our path, but it is also the source of life, and it is a source of health and healing. So does anybody want to talk about wisdom or have a comment to that? Okay, let's just did we do the orange affirmation? Yeah, we did. Let's do the yellow affirmation. All right. Wisdom illuminates my path and guides my every thought, word, and action.
I was going to say that I think it's apropos that there's not a lot of comment about wisdom, that it's not a talking point.
Yeah, that's great. See, that's why it's not. All right, it's the next one.
What's he saying?
Green. And green in the traditional pride flag represents nature, and in the 12 powers it represents order. So very similar. There's a correlation there as well. I think I'm just going to, let's just affirm these, and if you have a comment or question, we can go ahead and do that. So, I am one with all of life. My life is in balance and in order. All is well. Okay.
This is one of these is where when I talk to people, when someone says is that sometimes people listen, because I say when we're talking about gender, we're talking about the physical manifestation of genitalia. We're talking about hormones. We're talking about behavior. We're talking about there's much more to talk about than just say gender. So this is how we define it. And then I will go, well, there are bodies that are born with this genitalia and these hormones, and begin to explain that and somebody born with no genitalia, no hormones. And so all the things that we define it by prove that there are way more than two genders.
Right.
Even if we leave out the behavior part. And sometimes people will hear and listen when you talk about that. So the natural order is important to understand those things.
Yeah. Well, and what we understand as gender is mostly a social construct. We talk about gender clothing. I mean, clothing can't have a gender. And oftentimes, like the colors that we associate with gender, I mean, they flipped. Pink used to be a boy's color, blue used to be a girl's color. Why do we think pink is a girl's color and blue is a boy's color? Because that's what we're taught to think now.
Programming.
It was. They flipped it around as a marketing tool to sell products.
But real men wear pink, right?
I love pink. I'm wearing blue today, but yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the reality is clothing isn't it's not natural in that we're not born with clothing on. I love what RuPaul says. He says we're all born naked and the rest is drag. So yeah, this idea that gender expression in terms of clothing or jewelry, we created those things. Those are social constructs. And I am not an expert when it comes to biological sex, but there are several different biological sexes. There are intersex people. Their chromosomes are not always the same within people, so you can't really just use chromosomes to define someone's gender. So there's more than just this. There's men and then there's women. There's a spectrum of different gender, sexual expressions. Does that make sense?
Yes. And depending on hormonal access in utero, that changes the physical expression, or the expression of how genitalia either proceed or don't, and so there's a lot of variation. And I was going to say that about nature, that it's such a teacher.
Yeah.
When you think that you know how things are organized totally and stuff, and then you spend more time in nature, the awe is just something that you can't avoid if you're really looking at it.
Right. Well, and one thing that I talk about in the article that's going to be on the website is that we are nature. Nature isn't something you go out to and I mean, we certainly can go out and experience, the trees, but this idea that we are disconnected or separate from nature. We are nature. We are, we're biological creatures. Our actions matter in the whole ecological system. It's kind of like, when we talk about recycling, there's no such place as away. When you say, I'm going to throw this away, that place doesn't exist.
Or the ecosystem that exists on our skin.
Right. Oh, yeah.
That we don't even, if we could see it, we'd be freaking out.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I 100% agree with that. Okay, so in the traditional pride rainbow, blue symbolized serenity. And in the 12 powers, blue symbolizes faith. And let's go ahead and just read the affirmation. I am loved, guided, and supported. My intuition is always on my side, and I am at peace. So, I think that the idea of faith, and it promotes serenity. I have a different idea of faith than a lot of religious traditions. Sometimes religious traditions look at faith as a belief in certain stories, and that if you just believe the right stories, then some cosmic sky daddy won't torture you forever. That to me is not faith. And it's not even really a biblical representation either, because in the Bible, Jesus would go around telling people, you have more faith than anybody in Israel. And what he was doing is he was addressing people that were outside of his tradition. He never even said that his traditional stories were wrong. In fact, he said that they were right. However, he didn't equate faith with a belief in a certain set of stories, dogmas, doctrines, theologies. He did not equate that. Faith was confidence in something greater. And so he would say, your faith has healed you. And then it was kind of a slap in the face. The people with the right theology, he would go around saying, oh yeah, this person who's a pagan has way more faith than you. So faith is not about having the correct beliefs, the correct stories. Faith is really about trusting that things can and will work out for our highest good. And that does produce serenity. I have never experienced the kind of faith that is often promoted by certain religious traditions. I don't really see that promotes a lot of serenity. In fact, one of the reasons why I started questioning my own religious history is because I read in Galatians where it says, the fruit of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And then I looked around me, I was like, well, where is it? Where is this? We all got the get out of hell free card, but like, where is this stuff? And then I started things like meditation, centering prayer. I started practicing the things that produced love and joy, and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and self-control. And as I started practicing those things, my vision of God, my understanding of God, grew so large that it could not be contained within my religious tradition anymore. So that to me is more about what faith is. And it does produce serenity. At least it has in me. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so in the traditional pride rainbow, turquoise was the color that symbolized magic. And in the 12 powers, turquoise symbolizes imagination. To me, there's a lot of correlation here. Although magic and imagination have two very separate etymologies, we use our imagination to create our reality, to create our experience of reality. In fact, when I was kind of like reading about the 12 powers, there's a phrase, let's see, that I haven't heard here, but apparently it's something that people in Unity say a lot. To set it right, see it right. I like that phrase. Yeah. And I liked that phrase, and I said, I couldn't remember it, but I want to start using it. To set it right, see it right. Yeah, and that's the implementation of imagination. And magic, magic, actually in the Unity tradition, I was just kind of looking at truth unity, and it's not really been looked at very highly. However, a lot of what we practice is not magical thinking, but we produce experiences through our thinking patterns, which if you look back etymologically for that word, magic, the root word for that was associated with a priestly class who created experiences that understood the nature of reality. Like
the magic.
Yeah. So yeah. I love tarot cards. I love the symbolism of tarot cards. But all right, so
no, that's the devil.
The devil's in the tarot cards. Yeah, absolutely. So some people really like that card. All right.
That just brings up Walt Disney to me.
Magic?
Walt Disney had such amazing imagination,
Mm-hmm.
and so many of the things that he created were so magical.
So magical, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and it just, that's just where it put my mind.
Yeah.
I just look at it this way. Magic is the way you look at a creation when you don't understand the process. Imagination is when you understand the process.
Yeah. I like the idea of reclaiming the word magic. I kind of like it. It's kind of a nice word.
Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah. But yeah, so let's go ahead and read the affirmation. My life is magical. I envision good unfolding in every area of my life.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And then the last color, purple, symbolized spirit in the traditional pride rainbow. And for Charles Fillmore, it symbolized power. And to me, there was also a lot of correlation between these two symbols as well. Because obviously spirit is the animating force that, that with which we channel our power. It is who we are, but it's how we're interconnected. Spirit.
It's what creates the magic.
It's what creates the magic, exactly.
It's what breathes us.
Yeah. Yeah, so the word, I like that, the word spirit, he said it's what breathes us. So the word spirit in most spiritual traditions comes from the word breath, or is the word breath. Like if you read in the Christian Bible, anytime you see the word spirit, it is just simply the word breath. And also, anytime you see the word, like the phrase Holy Spirit in the Bible, it is in the feminine, it is not in the masculine. And yet, if you read it in the English translation, it always says him or he, but more appropriately should always say she or her in the Bible, because, now I don't believe spirit has gender, but I also found it very interesting that all feminine references to God were removed from the Bible, and there are plenty of feminine references to deities in the Bible. There are plenty of deities in the Bible as well, but there are plenty of feminine references. So go ahead and then Susan.
The Shekinah is feminine.
Yep.
And I didn't know that when I named my son Shekinah. All the other Shekinahs he's ever met have all been female. But Phineas Quimby, talks about everything being spirit and the power that he had to erase disease was all done in the spirit. And when I was talking to Tom Taylor about this, he said he went into the quantum field.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how he could heal people. Now, he had to figure out what their issue was so that he could correct their thinking, or the word come right back.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you think creates. And so he would have to correct their thinking. But everything was spirit. And that's where the power is. And it's being able to get into that quantum field that changes everything.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I kind of like how language, especially surrounding spirituality, is constantly evolving, because it's like, oh, that's just, when I started learning about other faith traditions, I was like, oh, wait, they just use a different word for it. And a lot of this argument is just about the words that we're using to describe phenomena. And I'm like, why are we arguing over words? This seems like it seems so silly, But a lot of wars are fought over calling God the right term, right? It just seems so silly. But spirit itself, to me, is, there's just one spirit, and we're all experiencing it. We're all, it is the force that unites us all. So go ahead, Susan.
Well, what did it be when you said they took out all the female references to the Bible? In the Bible, the struggle of the the gay
LGBTQI.
Now, I don't know if that's politically correct, but
Yeah,
I
that's
don't mean it any other way, but...
Queer is actually becoming more politically correct, so you can say that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know.
Your struggle is the same struggle that women went through in the 20s, okay, which is not too long before I was born, and we were still going through it in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. And the black folks have been going through since before that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still going through it. It's an ongoing process of evolution on this planet.
Yeah. Well, in each step of the way, we have to sustain it as well.
Yeah, and like pot is legal, and it wasn't, and several of us went to prison for it because it wasn't. And we were ex-con, those are bad people. It's just evolution.
It is, yeah.
So I just see this part here, she talked about all kinds of different minority type identities and everything. And for me, the spirit and the concept of power, that's where the power is no matter where I am in the physical world, when I begin to believe that the physical world is where the power is, that's when I need to step back and go, it is not. All of this struggle in to define the physical world and where the power in the physical world is, is, I mean, there just isn't any in there. And so to me, the challenge is to be able to go back to spirit, see where the power is, and then come back and play in the physical world.
Yep.
And create it.
Yeah, and that we're a channel, we are a channel to spirit too, and that that is really where our source of power comes from. So let's do this affirmation, and then we'll go ahead and do the announcements and pass the basket. I use my power wisely. I am strong and I am safe. All is well. All right. And John, do you have the announcements?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Let's see. Join us Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., excluding holidays, for Silent Sunrise, and feel the power of collective prayer. You are welcome to stay a few minutes or 2 hours as your schedule allows. Obviously not on Memorial Day. Drum Circle meets June 1st at 6:30 in the sanctuary. We have a number of instruments available for your use. The 9:15 a.m. New Thought World Religion class for the month of June will be Trusting the Process of Change, taught by Amy Burnett. What a segue. Pride is June 10th. We would like to have a big presence at the parade. There will be a meeting after church on the 4th for all Pride volunteers. Save the date. Denise Rosier will be here in concert on June 24th. You can pre-purchase your ticket on our website.
Oh, no, not yet. It will happen, though. But
Okay. Soon you will be able to pre-purchase your ticket on our website. In addition, that is our 90th celebration of Unity here in Springfield, Missouri. We will gather together at 4 p.m. with a picnic and music from our Unity band. We are accepting items for door prizes, which will be given away every 15 minutes. Gift certificates, gift items, plants, etc.
What's the date?
That is June 24th. We are now accepting applications for teen director. You can pick up a job description from Dee Richardson in the office, and then she likes you to write something about why you're moved to become the teen director. Sue's class, The Christ, meets Wednesday at 6:30 during the month of June. Cost is $10 for credit and also suggested as a suggested love offering for non-credit participants. This is an in-person class only. Please don't let finances keep you from participating. Pickleball is back starting Tuesday at 5 p.m. All ages and skill levels are welcome. Woo woo! Next Sunday is Friendship Sunday Potluck. If you know what you're bringing, please sign up in the foyer. And the church office will be closed on Monday in honor of the holiday, Memorial Day, and Ladies Al-Anon meeting will be meeting anyway.
Thank you.